Hello, my name is John Bannon. I'm an attorney and philosopher. In today's video, I'm going over God versus magic. So, some people claim that God performs magic, and because magic is not real, then God is not real. However, we live in a Hansonian superdeterministic universe. That means that we live in three dimensions of space and one hidden static dimension of time in a fourth dimensional block universe. And the only thing in the block universe are real particles and nothing. Those real particles are not caused to exist because there's no cause and effect in physics under Hansonian superdeterminism. Consequently, there's no moving time. There's no way to move any of these particles. These particles can't be changed. They're fixed in place like pebbles in concrete, and they're permanent. Now, you can find the proof of Hansonian superdeterminism in the peer reviewed physics journal Physics Essays, volume 33, number 2, June of 2020, pages 216 through 218. So, the one thing about our static block universe that's full of particles that don't move is that these particles create patterns through the static dimension of time, which we describe through our logical mathematical laws of physics. So there is nothing magical about our superdeterministic static block universe. It's permanent, it doesn't change. There's nothing that can be magical about it. It just is. So, because our consciousness is an aspect of our permanent static block universe that doesn't move, then human consciousness is not magical either because it's derived from a non magical block universe. So, even though our consciousness is immaterial and it does seem somewhat magical, it is nonetheless a physical reality and an aspect of our static block universe. And the reason I know this is take, for example, if you consciously decide to move your arm, because your arm is undeniably a physical reality, then your future arm movement must be predetermined and in the future in the static dimension of time. So it has to be there in the dimension of time. But if your arm movement is there in the dimension of time, then your conscious decision to move your arm must also be predetermined and an aspect of physical reality in order for your arm movement to be predetermined and a future aspect of the static dimension of time. Now, the only thing that's physical that exists where our consciousness is brain particles. So it has to be that brain particles are what are the predetermined aspect of the block universe that lead to our predetermined conscious experience, which leads to the predetermined future movement of our arm. So, consciousness, even though it's immaterial, nevertheless must be a predetermined aspect of the physical block universe due to the arrangement of brain particles. Now, if I were to guess, I would say that the arrangement of brain particles is what um, creates a different form of logic, a logic I call the logic of the possible. And because it's a different form of logic, it must have its own reality in order to exist. And that reality is what we experience as our immaterial consciousness. But none of it's magic. It's all based on a non magical block universe. So, what consciousness is telling you is that there must be a different form of logic that is being exhibited by the complicated arrangement of your brain particles. And that different form of logic must have a natural reality in which to exist, which is your immaterial conscious experience. So, what real particles in the block universe are telling you is that the universe is a different form of logic that is defined by those real particles, which is also a different form of natural reality. If you think about a particle in the block universe, what's the point of a particle? You think about a particle, there it is. What's the point of a particle? The obvious point of a particle is to define the logic of our universe in accordance with the defined and unchangeable mathematical laws of physics. So, because our universe has defined logic, as evidenced by our defined and fixed laws of physics, then you need a particle, actually a lot of particles, in order to define that logic. So that's what the point of a particle is. It's to define the logic of our static block universe in place. Um, However, because our universe uses particles to define its logic, then that implies that the defining of the universe by particles comes from transcendent logic of undefined possible logical states. So particles are implying the existence of a transcendent logic that consists of all the undefined possible logical states for physical reality. And in fact, there was a very recent scientific experiment which proved that virtual particles played a role in the outcome of real particle proton collisions. And virtual particles are not real, they're mathematical constructs. So, what that's telling you is there has to be transcendent logic because the transcendent logic of a mathematical construct, namely the virtual particle, is playing a role in the results of real particle collisions. So transcendent logic has to be real. Um, so because transcendent logic is real, then it must have its own natural reality to exist in. And that natural reality is what we commonly call God. So the creating by God is not an act um, of magic. It's an act of defining a logical state which requires a natural reality in the form of real particles. So, God is not magic, but a foundational form of transcendent logic that, in defining logical states, creates a different form of natural reality consisting of real particles in a block reality or universe. So when God creates something that's not magic, that's a transcendent reality defining a particular logical state based on the laws of physics, but that defining itself manifests as a different form of natural reality, which we call particles. So it only seems to you like magic because you aren't experiencing this transcendent logic and its own reality, the reality of God. So it's sort of like your conscious experience would seem like magic to a rock or a particle. So a rock or a particle would look at your consciousness and think that was magic. Um, but that's only because the rock or the particle is not experiencing or participating in your different form of natural reality, which is manifested as an immaterial conscious experience. And under superdeterminism, our immaterial conscious experience has to be an aspect of the block universe. And there's nothing magical about the block universe. So there's nothing magical about your consciousness. All right. Well, I hope this puts this debate to rest that God is some sort of wizard or magician. That's just not true. And unfortunately, many people jump to that conclusion without understanding the physics or superdeterminism. So I'll give you a second to read the board. All right, until next time, take care.